welcome to today's session. Assessment and safeguarding, what does the data tell us? My name is Chris Lappin and I'm one of the International Education Advisors here at Renaissance and Dual Education. And as we always start our sessions with our mission, and our mission is very clear at Renaissance, and it's to accelerate learning for all. We strive to ensure that every student, regardless of their starting point, is seen, supported, and empowered to succeed. And I think that same principle sits very much at the heart of today's webinar, because when we think about effective safeguarding, it really does begin with seeing every student clearly, not just through their academic performance, but through the patterns and signals that can sit behind the data. And I think by using assessment insights proactively, we can identify when a learner's progress or well-being begins to change and act early before it becomes a bigger issue. So today we'll explore how combining data, particularly Cat4, progress tests and past data, can help schools do exactly that, using the information that many of you already have in the UAE to spot the quiet shifts in engagement and well-being that perhaps traditional approaches might miss. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Agatha, Academic Vice Principal at Elite Private School, who'll be sharing how her and her team are using data to strengthen safeguarding and ensure every child's needs are recognised and met. Agatha, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll pass over to you.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you here today. As every school, we are always very busy. We always want to make sure that we are doing the best for our kids. And this is something I've been doing for over 20 years now. I've been a teacher, head of department, principal, at the moment academic vice principal, but most of all at heart, I am an inclusion passionate. Okay, and this topic today goes very closely with what I believe. I believe that with the right knowledge, with the right data, and with the right interest from our side, we can make our children, all of them, successful. We often use those big words, buzzwords, like safeguarding or data. What are they? Safeguarding is obviously protection. It means being there for our kids, right? And when it comes to data, there are different types of data. And we can't really say that this piece of data is more important than that. It doesn't exist without each other. One of the examples of that dilemma about the data and where to look for first, I will tell you about it when we go to the slide about the identification of students at risk and triangulating the data. But the keyword of this particular part is triangulation. When it comes to data, we need to collect it from different sources. We are very lucky these days to have access to different systems. Therefore, we can easily get the attainment scores, the progress scores. We can translate them into judgments where we are as a school. We can also extract tardiness or absences easily from the system. These two components are easy to extract and, let's say, compare. There is something, though, more difficult to track, but we must never forget about it. And this is classroom participation and behavior in general, because it is a strong indication of anything that is happening before, during, and after the drop in academic results. Chris? Okay, so As we mentioned here, academic data can be all sorts of reports drawn into from different sources. We may be talking about external benchmark exams, and for every school, it's different. We've got cognitive tests. For us, we are using CAT4 as our cognitive test, working for us wonderfully several years now. And of course, we use our internal assessments. For any performance decline, we have to be very careful to make sure that we catch it before it's too late. Therefore, all sorts of diagnostic tests and midterms will be indicators for us to, let's say, raise alarm if necessary. Now, all the time, we will work together with the pastoral team and with the teachers. These people will supply us with attendance, punctuality, and feedback logs. And when it comes to the teachers, their ongoing observation and them knowing the students better than anyone else is what gives us the ongoing trend in engagement. And the key word now is trend, because we have to be alarmed when the trend is starting to happen, right? So not when the student already fails, it is too late. So when a student fails, I would say us as leaders, as educator, we have failed already. That's why we need to monitor those trends so carefully. And when it comes to engagement, there are many barriers that we have to consider. So we cannot just mark the child down disengaged, misbehaving, right? We have to be more open and more thorough when it comes to understanding the student's needs. It may be too bright, it may be too loud, it may be too fast. Okay, we are so different. As we are sitting here in this webinar, some of us will spend 2 hours happily in Dubai Mall, and I can't be there for more than 15 minutes. It's the same in the classroom. So we have to be very thorough and open-minded, processing all this data all the time. Chris.
Yeah, and Agatha, I think you pick up on a really good point there. I think as a former teacher myself, we have so many different pieces of data for children, thousands different sources of data, standardized, formative assessments, observational. And it's that case of, I think in today's age, we can be very data rich. We have the data, but sometimes, depending on how we use it and pull it together, we can be quite insight poor, I think, sometimes. And really picking up on your theme there of triangulation and trends, I think our mission with, especially within the GL suite of assessments, is really to provide schools with the tools and support so that all of the students reach their full potential. Because our assessments do provide a wealth of information to help you put together what we term as this whole student view, which is depicted on the slides here. Because as we said, safeguarding is ultimately about knowing our pupils, noticing, as Agatha mentioned, when something changes, potentially when potential isn't being realised, or maybe when confidence quietly drops. And I think increasingly schools are using data to support that instinct, definitely not as a replacement for professional judgment or to replace that, the teacher's hunch, but to try and surface what we might otherwise miss. I think what I'd like to touch upon now, based on Agatha's theme of triangulating the different types of data, is the cognitive potential from Cat4 and how we can try and triangulate that with academic performance, for example, from the progress test series. And then later on, we'll touch on PASS, which will really help schools move from that reactive to proactive safeguarding. So if we begin with the potential versus the performance, many of you will already be aware of Cat4 on the call, as it's used widely across the UAE. And Catline gives us that baseline of how a student could perform. It's completely curriculum neutral, and it focuses on how students think rather than what's being taught. Whereas the PT series, so the progress test in English, maths and science, That then shows us how students are actually performing against those standardized benchmarks. And together, they can help us see the relationship between potential and performance. Again, highlighting where a pupil might be under or potentially overachieving and where support can have the most impact. And if a student's performance falls well below their potential, this may not just be an academic issue. It may indicate underlying issues, changes in home circumstances, emotional well-being, disengagement, or indeed a safeguarding risk. And that gap is often the first alert. And I think the sooner we can spot it as educators, the more chance we have to intervene before things escalate. It's all about being timely. So what I've got on here, just to try and exemplify that point for us, is a set of data. So just take some time, have a look at these 3 student scores. I've just pulled some data from progress test in maths. Scores for the students over year 6, year 7, and year 8. Just take a moment to think about which students are working as you would expect in mathematics, and who's making good progress over time, just looking at their attainment scores. Now, let me ask you, how does your thinking change when we add in their CAP4 quantitative score? So if I display that on the screen there now, does your thinking change when we start to add in another layer of data? Well, if we have a look at Musa, with just the attainment data, we might feel confident that Musa is fine. His attainment scores definitely are above average every year. So any score above 111 for the SAS, we would say is above average. However, the CAP4 score does suggest he should be attaining at an even higher level than he is. Alex, on the other hand, Alex is working within the level that his CAP4 would be suggesting. And even though his PTM scores at the start are below average in year 6, by year 8, Alex's scores are well into the average band now. And this is particularly positive given the initial CAP4 quantitative score of 87. The picture for our final student there, Victoria, as we can see, is very different. Her CAP4 quantitative score of 88 is below the average band. But if we look at her attainment scores, she's consistently working above this level. And by the time she took the progress test maths in year 8, her SAS score was 108, again at the higher end of the average band. So what I hope this exemplifies is that with only just looking at one set of data, the attainment, it can be difficult to answer who's making good progress, as we are only looking at one piece of information in isolation. And by adding in ability data from the CAP4, a different picture starts to emerge. And I think this is how combination reports and combining that data can really add meaningful insights into your data puzzle, as well as supporting the evidence-based decision making regarding follow-up actions or any intervention programs. So if you're not familiar with combination reports compare student outcomes in attainment tests against their underlying ability scores as obtained in CAP4. And comparisons between these test scores can help to identify what I like to call red flags for students, either with possible SEND needs, and also serve as what I like to term an early alert mechanism. So this kind of starts educators thinking about which students who are underachieving relative to the potential. Is this a possible indicator of disengagement or emotional strain? Whose results may suggest any unmet learning needs or SEND concerns? And when you see across the data pupils whose results fluctuate sharply across subjects, for example, could this signal possible inconsistency either linked to well-being or attendance? And in this example on screen, we are comparing the Cat 4 verbal battery against the progress test in English score. And in the combination reports, 1 of 5 discrepancy categories are calculated for us, and it stands out for us as educators. We're not having to combine and search for the data themselves. The reports really do make it quite clear. So if we take Alice, for example, Alice, a quiet but bright year 7 student, let's say, her Cat 4 verbal is 121, so we know she's got a strong verbal reasoning skill set and the potential to do very well in English and language-based subjects. But when we look at her progress test and English score, it's just 101, and that's much lower than expected based on her ability. Now, at first glance, we might think she just underperformed on the day. But when we see this kind of discrepancy, it can often be a signal that something deeper may be going on. For instance, could there be a specific learning need, like dyslexia, that's making it harder for her to express her ideas in writing? Or perhaps she's become disengaged or anxious due to the curriculum demands, leading to reduced effort or focus. And if we factor in that all important teacher hunch and teacher judgment, if her teachers are noticing that she's quieter than usual, maybe some unexplained absences, there could also be a pastoral or a safeguarding element here at play. And I think this is where the combination reports are so powerful. And I found them so powerful as a senior leader because it doesn't just tell us who's underperforming, but it also helps us as educators, us who are responsible for safeguarding our children. It helps us to ask the right questions. It doesn't give us the answers, but it helps us ask the right questions at an early stage. So students do not quietly slip through the cracks. If you are a user of Cat4 and the progress tests, several different types of combinations reports are available to you. You can compare Cat4 with the new group reading test, progress test in English, progress tests in maths. You can also download reports which compare Cat4 with both the new group reading test and the progress test in maths, or the progress test in English and the progress test in maths. And most importantly, it will also give you questions to consider, which will really support you in reflecting upon a child's progress and future support that may be needed for the children. We can see the example on screen shows some of the questions for children whose scores on the NGRT are lower than expected when compared against the Cat4 verbal battery. For example, here, are there any students in the group that are still acquiring English? If so, is their understanding of English sufficient to allow them access the language demands of the NGRT? Now, if this is something you'd like to take a step further with, perhaps you are a user of Cat4 and the progress tests, we do have a range of training and support that I would like to flag to you. It's free on-demand CPD certified training. Two of the ones I would recommend, and Terry will put it in the chat, the combination report training and our introduction to data triangulation. And you'll also see a quick poll pop up on your screen. If you'd like someone from the team to follow up with you with a little bit more information or arrange a short data session, then please do just let us know through that. A great opportunity to explore how the data from the assessments, which many of you will already have in school, can work together to build up that whole student view and really strengthen that early identification piece. Agatha, I'll pop back over to you if you don't mind.
Sure, pleasure. Yeah, the triangulation was beautifully explained here. But no triangulation, guys, will work, at least from my experience, if we don't agree on the definitions of the words that we are using in our analysis. And if we don't know the policies that are coming from the authorities, for example, here in the UAE, we are bound by the policies from the ministry, but also from the local governing body, which is the other, whose policies may be different from any other emirate. Therefore, it's so important to know all of these when we have a discussion about programs, about requirements, about how we implement things. To give you an example, the definitions of able learners, gifted students, and talented students in Abu Dhabi are different, perhaps, from what we have learned back in the days. I used to understand that gifted and talented students were the students who are achieving, whereas now we look at it from a completely different angle. So we say that able students consistently score well in assessments. Yes, they are able to learn a decent amount of material fairly quickly, and they are more able than other students in comparison at the same age. Now, gifted students, we again may expect a student who is outperforming all his peers. But on the contrary, giftedness is usually hidden, and we can't really see it unless we are lucky to catch them doing something that they are passionate about, or we do a decent cognitive test in which we see that the score, like Chris said, is not matching their daily performance. So in Cat 4, for instance, if your child scores over 130, be alarmed that probably, most probably, we need to do more for that child. And if that compares very weirdly to their assessment, internal, external knowledge-based assessments, that means that we are not meeting their needs. There will be additional learning needs there. Now, again, another thing that we misunderstand is the additional learning needs, or SEN, special educational needs. We also misunderstand that term. And we are shy sometimes to talk about it openly, whereas it's nothing positive or negative. It's a neutral term indicating that we have to approach a child from a different angle and maybe do things differently with them so that they can achieve. Therefore, when we speak to the parents, we also have to let them know your child is perhaps in our department classified as a student with additional learning needs, but it doesn't mean anything negative. It's something completely neutral. They might be gifted. Look at the score. Look at their performance. Let's bridge it. So all in all, that communication around the needs has to be very sensitive. And the data itself is very sensitive. When we talk about the child, when we write the reports, when we send an email, when we include personal information, we have to be very careful and communicate with empathy. Before we speak, we should think, how would we react if we heard it about our own child? Chris. Another thing that I wanted to mention is collaboration. You heard me already in this webinar saying we all the time, because there is nothing without collaboration, okay? And in our school, the way we did it, we decided to establish a committee which is called Students at Risk. And that is more than inclusion. Okay, because inclusion usually deals with students with additional learning needs, GTA, gifted, talented, able students, but also English as an additional learner students. However, students at risk can include more than that. Okay, and here there is no wrong and right in terms of identification. Any of these factors that you can see here, it may be attendance, it may be additional learning need or behavior or the academic level, may be the first piece of data that you will start with, if you know what I mean. But still, you will have to triangulate it with the other areas to see how we can help. We've decided to go with, as a very big school with almost 2,000 students, to make sure that we see all of them. We decided to start from different angles, but our primary first step is a diagnostic test. Okay, so the diagnostic test will flag the academic gaps, and then we will then confirm it with the midterm test. But we will also draw the lowest and the highest results from our cognitive tests and from our attendance records, as well as the behavior records. There are policies there, as I told you, that are very helpful. The policy for behavior, for example, in Abu Dhabi, will tell you where the child is in terms of, the level of violation. Logging this data, using this data together, is great. And for example, today, as I am presenting this webinar, my team back there, together with me, is updating the live list. So as we go, every single week, we update this live list. If there is a new attendance concern, we will flag it. If there is a new behavior concern, we will flag it. So that is one way that you can do it. But obviously, I understand that there are different schools with different needs and different, let's say, even sizes. But this is the way that's been working for us. Regular committee meetings is something I've mentioned already. Yes. Early warning systems are also something that we can do with our wonderful systems, such as, for example, Agenation or other systems that you can use at school. We also recommend using color coding, because color coding helps us all visualize data, right? Not all of us are, let's say, that quick in numbers and calculating percentages. So therefore, having those at least three color, let's say, coding shades will help you. For us, we will do, for example, yellow for support group, green for on level, and blue for extension. That is for classifying the levels. Then for attendance, we will also use and punctuality colors, right? So in Abu Dhabi, for example, the dangerous levels of absence are over 10% for Emirati students and 15% for non-Emirati students. You know, when I think about myself when I was at school, I don't think that 10% is a huge percentage of absence. But it's been proven that this is already an alarming level. So we have to be, let's say, on top of that all the time, right? And analyze that data and share as a team as we go. One other thing that has been, thank God, fashionable over the last years, and it didn't used to be back in the days when we were at school, is student well-being surveys. Yeah, student voice was not something that we would listen to, and thank God it's different now. And again, there are many different tools that schools can use. There are, Google Forms, old-fashioned, let's say, Google Forms that you can use if you are good at analyzing them. But there are also many other systems that you can use to facilitate surveys, and not only surveys, but the analysis and the trends, again, termly. Chris.
And I think that would be opportune for me to probably mention my one of the favourite surveys we do indeed do at GL is the PASS survey, because it very much picks up on what you've just mentioned there, Agatha, about you having that color-coded system. We talked that teachers are swamped with data. We need to make it as easy and as quick for concerns to be pointed out. And that's definitely something that you can do with our PASS survey. I think well-being, as you've said, it's quite rightly very high on the agenda at the moment. A very big focus, but it's something that's incredibly hard to measure and to take that pulse of and to track. So with the PASS, so if you're not aware of the PASS survey, it essentially stands for Pupil Attitudes to Self and School, and it provides evidence of support and additional non-academic barriers, which may impact learning and engagement in your wider school community. It's very much a quick and accessible student voice survey to identify student attitudes to themselves as learners, and I think most importantly, their learning experiences. As Agatha mentioned, firmly keeping your finger on the pulse of student well-being is very important. PASS typically used twice per academic year. Definitely after students have had time to settle into a new class or a phase or a setting, and again ahead of any key points of transition. It can also be used from students aged 4 to 18. It's a right through consistent data set that it will provide you with. And broadly accessible to all learners. It has audio and written content available in the digital survey, and it's also translated. So it's very, very very useful for students who have English as an additional language. It only takes approximately 15 to 20 minutes to complete, and again, the results are available for immediate analysis following the test. There's no crunching of the numbers. It uses a RAG-rated system, so any potential red flags are really there for the busy teacher, the busy leader to pick up on. It's a survey style of assessment. It consists of 50 statements for the older children, 27 for the younger children. And it essentially explores three areas related to student attitude: contextual, self-regard, motivational. And it does this through a series of 9 standardized, and again, for me, this is really key, it's standardized attitudinal measures, or what we call our factors, which are linked to educational goals. So you can see a few of those on the screen here. They vary from feelings about school, their attitudes to attendance, which is quite a key one, which reveals attitudes towards their attendance at school. So if scores are low or begin to drop here over time, this could be an indicator of poor future attendance. And also really important factors like their perceived learning capability. Do students perceive themselves as a good learner? Now, again, picking up on that key point that Agatha made about the color-coded system, the analysis is presented to you in two forms, percentages and percentiles. Percentiles, which we can see on the slide here, are those standardized bits of data and provide that comparison to that wider norm. They are color coded, so you can quickly spot high and low scores. For example, it's really easy to pinpoint those scores in red, which do highlight the lowest 5%. And the recommendation here is that these should be taken as an immediate area of concern to follow up. So there are a number of levels of PASS, and I could talk to you for hours about PASS, but what I wanted to flag up in terms of our webinar topic of safeguarding is our level 3 analysis. I'm really wanting to focus on the child. I want to know that child inside and out. So our level 3 analysis focuses on the individual student. Your eye is naturally drawn to students with reds or ambers across the board. But I would probably say that 9 times out of 10, you as that teacher, you know that student, you'll probably already know these issues, and you may already be working with them with your pastoral support team. But for me, and I think it's the students with maybe the occasional red or pockets of amber, who are probably the most interesting to look at. They may not be displaying any behavioural signs yet in the classroom, but there could be underlying issues that, if addressed quickly, could prevent escalation. And as Agatha said, it's using the data for that early identification. But don't forget about those children on the opposite side of the spectrum with high green scores across the board. Think about what's really working well for those students too. So I'm just conscious of the time here. So I'm just going to focus in here on Charlotte here. Charlotte is a great example of a student who may be overlooked without something like PASS to shine a light on the aspects of well-being. You can see she has high percentile scores across all of the factors except for general work ethic. Whilst other profiles may appear more alarming at first instance, as I say, when we look at Sarah's above, students like Charlotte can be easily missed. And if these students aren't quickly identified and appropriately supported, what are the implications later on? And as I say, PASS can be repeated. And what this will allow you to do, it will allow you to track shifts in student attitudes and their feelings over time. And I think that's really important to notice any downward trends. It's not a progress report in the traditional sense, but a way of monitoring those changes in perception and indeed your school climate through the eyes of your learners. And again, it lets you ask, has something changed? If it has, why? And that insight is critical to allow us as educators to intervene early. A pastoral check-in, a conversation with home, a targeted support plan before things escalate and do indeed become a serious safeguarding risk. And of course, we've mentioned the Cat 4. And sometimes it's quite easy to think, well, Cat 4 data is about academics, PASS is about well-being, but the beauty and the insights we can gain when you blend those pieces of data together is really, really insightful. And one of the ways which I've just flagged up on our slide here is by plotting Cat 4 attainment against a student's perceived learning capability, which is one of the factors from the survey. And when you do that, you'll usually see 4 broad groups start to emerge. Down in the bottom left, the yellow quadrant, students with lower scores for both attainment and perceived learning capability. Obviously, these students can really benefit from early identification and targeted support. You've also got students up there in the top left in the purple quadrant. I find these students really interesting. These students are those who have a real strong belief in their own ability. They think they're capable learners, but their attainment doesn't yet reflect that confidence. And I'm sure as educators, we can all think of students like that in our class, needing a different type of support. But then really, we're drawn to the bottom right here, the green quadrant, what we term as the fragile learners, pupils who actually have high attainment, they are able, but really have low perceptions of their ability for some reason or another. So in other words, they don't understand or recognize how capable they are. And this group is particularly at risk of underachieving because their self-belief doesn't match their actual potential. And what that allows us as educators to do is potentially pick out these children, look at the other factors. Is it a certain factor that may be indicating that? Has something gone on at home? And that allows you to follow up and ask those right questions. And for these learners, our Path Intervention Toolkit, great resource to provide some structured and evidence-based support to help students like this build that confidence. So over in the Path platform, what you'll get is over 70 recommended, research-backed practical interventions that you can use in your school as a team to help build on the issues identified. Now, if we bring this together then, going back to that term, an early alert model, again, I've just touched on the CAT4, the PT and the PASS, but as Agatha beautifully explained, you will have different data sets in your school. You may track attainment in another way, but the principle, the idea to create this early alert model is very much the same. When you bring them together, you can really allow safeguarding to become data informed rather than data driven, because we want to catch it before it becomes an issue. So if we take this student, for example, in the middle, you can see the CAT4 showing strong potential. But when we overlay the PT results for this student, we can start to see underperformance relative to the potential. And if we look back, we can see here that there's been a regression from her previous scores. So we're noticing this downward trend. When we start to add in the barriers to learning and well-being piece, so I'm just taking feelings about school and attitudes to attendance here, this combination starts to suggest that this student is not struggling cognitively, potentially disengaging emotionally. Something's going on in the life of this student that, it's imperative, a moral imperative that we help this student to succeed. And without this triangulation, I would argue that this student may simply look like a student who's not trying. But with the data together, the student becomes, we open that safeguarding conversation, bringing in, as Agatha said, I love that, using that terminology of we. Safeguarding, as we all know, is everyone's responsibility. Agatha, I've talked too long, but I could talk about PASS till the cows come home. I'm not passionate about it. Sorry.
Yeah, I would like to wrap up with a few comments on impact, because we have beautifully explained how we believe we could identify our struggling learners struggling for various reasons. But what is very important is making sure that there is progress for each and every one of them, whether it is progress in self-confidence following sessions with your social worker, or it is progress academically, or perhaps in terms of attendance. We've got to have very smart goals. They have to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. And when we say time-bound, some things we can improve very quickly, then we should go for it. Attendance should improve, let's say, within a week or two. Punctuality within a day. So there are things that we don't have to wait a term or a year for to see improvement in. Okay. However, we also have to be realistic when we put targets in place, especially as leaders, senior leaders, for our teachers. If we observe a child who is also, let's say, a child with additional needs, and they are already 3 grade levels below, we can't put this responsibility on a teacher to catch up within 1 year. If we could see that it wasn't possible for over 3 years before. Therefore, it has to be an outcome of a very careful approach, not to set anyone up for a failure, okay? But once those targets are in place, we have to review our action plans, guys. We have to make sure that they are predominantly for the student. And I know that we are all under a lot of pressure to deliver in terms of, also meeting our targets when it comes to achievement. But the most important thing is making sure that it's real for the child, and that child doesn't enter the next year with the data that is in any way inflated, because this way, again, there will be more failure for that particular child. Finally, staff accountability. I believe that we are still perhaps sometimes forgetting about our teachers in terms of how much work they input in every single child. So we do have to make sure that we see the teachers, the ones who are trying the most. And there is accountability program or system in place, that the ones that have improvement, and I wouldn't say the improvement in marks only, but the improvement in, for example, the surveys, the well-being surveys, they are noticed. Those teachers are obviously trying hard to connect. And I would like to possibly end with the most, let's say, beautiful sentence I've heard recently. I heard it before, but it's still on my mind. Connection before curriculum. So let's reward those teachers that are striving to connect with each and every child and discover and then respond to their needs. That's all from me.
No, that's absolutely great, and I think that checks us back beautifully, doesn't it? To, safeguarding is about knowing that student, and those teachers who know their students in and out, supported through the data and their relationships with the students. I think that's key, and I think you've explained that beautifully, Agatha. But thank you very much. That brings us close to the end. I'm very just conscious of time on the webinar. Perry, have there been any questions that potentially we could address just before we close in the
Yes.
Q&A box?
Yes, there has been a question, and I'm conscious that we also spoke about pass, and there is a poll for that. So I am going to pop up the poll quickly while I ask that question. I'm just going to pop the. So if you just heard more about pass, if you are interested, I've put up a poll. If you're not, don't worry, don't need to fill it out. But if you are interested in knowing more, or you have passed and want to, learn more about your data, please do that poll. In the meantime, the question that we have been asked is, why doesn't GL provide combination reports for CAT 4, PTE, PTM and PASS? This would really help in triangulating data for individual learners. Do you want to answer that, Chris?
Yeah, that is a great question. It would be particularly helpful in triangulating data for the learners. In a roundabout way, we do. We don't in the in the sense that we don't have an automated report for this, but as part of the education advisor team, so myself included here, we work with schools closely to support you in how to take your sets of data. So I would recommend, definitely, if you've not explored that and your school does use CAT 4 and uses PASS, please do reach out via our data consultation service. They are complimentary. We offer essential services, and where one of the educational advisors will guide you in how to extract your CAT 4 and extract the PASS data. Because sometimes you might want to as well look at one factor. So I know with key transition years, for example, we won't look at perceived learning capability, but we may look at the factor response to curriculum demands. So we can start to see, are there any needs in key transition areas? I've worked recently with a school, again, very bespoke. I think this is why we don't do it automated, because it's very bespoke to the needs of schools. Looking at obviously EAL learners as identified in the verbal CAT 4 score based on their feelings at school. So you can start to get insights for those students who have low verbal scores. predominantly English as additional language learners, how are they feeling towards school? What support in that provision could be made? So please definitely reach out to the team. I'd love to spend some time with you and with this with your schools, looking at that data, building those connections, and then empowering yourselves to feel confident to take that data yourselves and make that make those insights. Hopefully that answers that one, Terry. But great question, thank you.
Thank you.